A while ago, I made a video about gender roles in Undertale, and while I had a lot to discuss, Deltarune is definitely a game that has even more content to touch upon, and I can't believe it's taken me this long to make a Deltarune version. Today, let's dive into the role that gender plays in developing Deltarune's story. A hill I will gladly die on is enforcing that Chris is in fact non-binary. They are only referred to using they/them pronouns, they appear androgynous, no one ever genders them. It makes zero sense to me for people to argue that their gender is to be decided by the player. The beginning sequence tells us we can't choose who we are in this world, implying Chris is their own entity that we possess. And I don't know, it's kind of like that's one of the biggest plot points of the whole game. It also makes zero sense for people to argue that Chris isn't non-binary because their gender is never stated, so it means it's not canon. Look me in the eyes right now and just say it to my face that you can't handle diversity being represented, since you're gonna pull arguments out the hoo-ha about this and try to argue labels off of Chris because they're never explicitly mentioned. This makes no sense to me. Why can't there be a non-binary character? Why does a non-binary character have to yell, "Hey guys, it's me, the non-binary character," for anyone to just accept it? What is so bad about a character that has no gender? Why do you have to put your pronouns on the character you play as? Were you not all the same goofies playing Zelda? Nobody put their pronouns on Link. You are not Chris, bro. Pack it up. This is an RPG, not a me PG. Okay, just accept it. I'm tired of hearing Chris and he in the same sentence. Who is he? What game are you playing? Delta Republican? Deltarune the character? You are so fake, bro. You're such a fake fan. You look so stupid right now. Who is he? You have the reading comprehension skills of a blind goldfish if you think Chris is a boy. I hate to be the one to tell you this. Now, it is implied in the game that Chris is possibly born a boy and transitioned and or thought they should be a boy through the man country egg room. I've said this once and I'll say it again. It does not goddamn matter if Chris was born a boy, girl, or rubber band. They use they, them, and that's all that matters. However, we can use this text and some thinking to come up with some theories on their possible motivations or pasts. Also, side note, looking up man country egg room will show you pictures of the oldest gay bathhouse. What is Toby trying to tell us here? Curdly canon? It will also show a bunch of farmers with giant cartons of eggs. I need to be more specific in my searches on Google. Anyways, a sign reads, "It's a man's world," and another reads that non-men are a-okay too. While this could be a comment on Chris being human in a monster world, or us being able to talk with the man behind the tree here and in no other egg room, and that's why it's called man country, I still think we can look at it through the view of validating Chris's gender in a way. My two takes on this, assuming it's about gender, is that Chris is either AMAB non-binary and is being validated by the sign, or that Chris feels like they should, for whatever reason, be more man-like, but aren't. Maybe since they have an older brother, that they think they should be more like him, or maybe more man-like and stand up against Susie bullying them. Could be some possible candidates here. With Chris being non-binary, shown through the use of they/them pronouns and the possibility that the sign dialogue is just Toby straight up saying, "Chris is not a man," a lot of impactful storytelling is present through the game. I already mentioned how I think Chris being possessed by the soul works as an allegory for what it's like being trans, feeling controlled by what you should be rather than who you really are. I think it's also possible that being human in a monster world could also serve this purpose, being different and no one knowing what to do with you. But this could also be used the same way for things like being a person of color, being disabled, or being neurodivergent. Guess that's the power of really good writing and being able to relate something to a bigger sense. Chris being non-binary is big and impactful for the story. Aside from just representation for the trans community, like I mentioned before, us possessing Chris and them fighting for freedom is a huge theme of Deltarune. Chris being trans further exemplifies this and embodies what it feels like to be trans. I talk about all of that a bit more in depth in my Chris analysis video. For now, let's look at the weird route and the gender roles illustrated by Chris and Noelle. I've made my fair share of contributions into the weird route commentary, but I do want to reiterate some thoughts I've probably mentioned on this channel before. Not that any of you are subscribed. And organize what I'm thinking here since this is the video to do it. Shout out to Ali Dreamer for exposing me to some of these ideas for the first time. So, in the weird route, we force Noelle and Chris into a heteronormative relationship, where Chris plays the man, and Noelle plays the obedient female. I always saw the romantic undertones of the weird route and ignored them because they felt, well, weird. And now I see how intentional they are and literally are there to add a layer of discomfort. You're taking two queer teens and actively erasing their identities on top of, manipulating one of them. The ring, Spampton's comments, the whole dynamic is all just a pile of forced heteronormality on two characters we know are queer. The meaning behind this interpretation is a strong criticism of the world forcing heterosexuality onto people and erasing queer identities. We don't know how this route will end, but I can assume not well. Perhaps there will be a moment that really shows you can't just force away people's identities into what is more normal. I think the weird route also paints dynamics like this in any relationship, including heterosexual ones, as disturbing and almost dystopian. I mean, I get chills thinking about the interactions of Noelle and Chris in the weird route. Seeing Chris take the lead and manipulate and abuse Noelle, who is now powerless and obedient. Something I want to mention that Stuffed Alpaca brought up in her video on gender in Deltarune is the trope of next-door neighbor / childhood friend female characters becoming romantic interests, which I think is played on in the weird route with the romantic undertones mentioned. She also mentions how in the normal route this trope fails, since Noelle is a lesbian, and Chris is not a male, and Chris is an entity outside of us, so it's not really the standard RPG trope that it could have been. I find how the trope is being squashed in the normal route and eerily played along with in the weird route really interesting and good writing on Toby's part. It serves as a commentary on the trope in both instances, which in part is commentary on gender roles and the typical RPG love story as a whole. Noelle herself, outside of the messed up romance, provides a commentary on misogyny and feminism in both the normal and weird routes. She's a passive character who, in the weird route, is easily manipulated by her shy and people-pleasing traits. She winds up completely powerless, not in a literal power sense, in a having a voice of her own sense. In the normal route, she embraces who she is and begins to gain confidence, but she's still awkward and passive. There's nothing wrong with being shy as a person or someone who doesn't like conflict, but I think we can look into her character a bit more here. I think something worth noting is how Noelle is so polite and willing to help others, and I feel like if we really want to look at this under a microscope, we can assume she was told the typical, be polite always, don't cause issues, don't argue phrases thrown out to a lot of young girls, saying they need to be respectful and ladylike over opinionated, resulting in getting used and stepped all over a lot. Now, Noelle isn't all bad traits in female characters. She also shows growth and is able to become more powerful with her voice and more confident. I think she could really grow into a more opinionated and fierce, in a way, character as the normal route progresses. I think the weird route will continue to progress with her becoming more and more oppressed and held to these more negative standards of being a girl, and will ultimately end with her breaking away or either completely giving in. Additionally, Noelle is another Toby Fox character that's gay and gets no stigma about it. Unless Carol introduces some stigma, but I highly doubt that's the route she'll take. I think she'll be more, Noelle, you're such a disappointment. Why aren't you perfect and looking for Des? And not, Noelle, no kissing girls in my house. Also, I do have to note, Carol has horns too. So either it's a family of trans deer, or Noelle transfem theory is transfam would be if Carol and Noelle are trans. I still think anyone can headcanon LGBTQ identities onto characters so long as it doesn't erase previously determined identities, so I'm not trying to shut this down, I stand with the movement. Also gotta mention this even if it's superficial, Noelle is a feminine lesbian and yay femmes, yay normie lesbians. It's always good to represent a minority and always great to resent, that is not what I said. It is always great to represent it stereotype free. Nonetheless, shout out Butch Tomboy Susie, we still love you. I was scrolling a Reddit thread while looking for some ideas to write into my script Please don't cancel me for taking inspiration from Redditors. Sometimes they say interesting things. And someone mentioned Berdly, and all I thought about was the Berdly meme, and I was like, yeah, I'm putting this in there. They got some good points. Here's a section where I look at all the brief little comments that I can make on other characters that are kind of superficial and or did not have enough, for me to run with and write a whole section on. Even though I noticed this section is longer than both the Noelle and Chris sections, but we're gonna ignore that. Where the hell am I in the script? If you have something to add, don't be afraid to comment. I don't bite. Unless you disagree with me, then I bite. I'm kidding. Berdly is low-key a showcase of toxic masculinity. I think we can all see this. He views his only worth as being seen romantically, and it's so cringe and funny because it's done right. And sorry, Berdly lovers, but if we were to really break it down, like, I'm starting to sympathize with the Berdly haters. I mean, he assumes every girl who talks to him is in love with him. I can't. Berdly is the reason we can't casually compliment guys without them wanting to sleep with us. Berdly also feels a pressure to be successful and strong and smart and not show emotion, and that is so toxic. What the hell is happening? Oh my god, we can't have anything serious on this channel. God damn. That's so toxic masculinity of him. He's like toxic masculinity if it was even more gay than it already is. I don't know. I'm a firm Berdly is queer believer. I saw someone say he's aromantic and overcompensating, and I was like, oh my god, I love you for that. I mean, Berdly literally says Chris will have to fight for his hand at the festival. He don't gaff they're non-binary. I think a character like Berdly is so well written and shows the side of men thinking that they need a relationship and a million girls and everyone wants to sleep with them and they can't show emotion and have to be hardworking. Also, he's so condescending to girls too. But at the same time, he's just such a loser with bad gaydar, and he barely understands social cues, and he's so annoying, but he's so endearing. He's like boy fail. I love Berdly, I'm sorry. I hope he develops more and isn't just a punching bag for jokes and continues like being low-key misogynistic. I hope that changes. I hope there's development in him getting through the toxic masculinity pushed onto him. Or an explanation as to why he's that way. Now, fluffy boys and mean girls, what more do I have to say? On a surface level, we can all agree that Rouse and Susie turn gender norms upside down. Rouse is also, I say this every video, is it Rouse or Rouse? I say Rouse. He's a soft pacifist and full of empathy and emotional intelligence. I mean, I know like 4 guys who have any of those traits. He chooses to literally pacify characters and doesn't want to hurt anyone. He has an amazing emotional regulation in a world and time where we normalize young men lashing out with anger as a display of masculinity. Susie is rough. She's mean. She wants to fight, which I think we can all agree stems from unseen issues in her home life or upbringing that reflect her need to bully and harass others. Hurt people hurt people. Even after she opens up a bit more to us, she's still an overall more violent and tomboyish character. We can all agree and see how these traits and characters show the opposite of typical gender roles and norms. Now, seeing a tomboy in media isn't shocking or life-changing anymore. We all know masculine-dressing girls and feminine-dressing boys exist. While there's still a bit more stigma surrounding the latter, both are becoming more and more respected and observed in society in most cultures. It's so superficial, but it's there with both these characters, and at this point, the whole cast is just fighting against the typical roles of gender in some way, shape, or form, criticizing a stereotype. Additionally, we have the unks of the series, Chris and Noelle's parents. Asgore and Toriel are flawed, deep characters, and the fandom keeps simplifying into motherly sweet Toriel and silly boy fail Asgore, or into uncaring and selfish Toriel and creep deadbeat Asgore. Both these characters can portray a multitude of traits here. We don't need to just choose one. Toriel is caring and motherly and plays into the standard mother who takes care of children's emotional and caregiving needs, while also having made mistakes, got too drunk, shattered the trust she had with Susie. While Asgore is written as both a silly, carefree dad who's trying his best and one that's overstepping Toriel's boundaries and not doing enough to provide for his kids. The relationship seems to showcase typical mother has to do everything while the father is absent, doing his own thing tropes, and I think even before the divorce, this is probably how things were. Asgore is written to just be charming and lovable enough for most of us to be able to ignore how he stalks Toriel and fails to provide for his family. And yet Toriel makes one mistake, and somehow years of building her up as a mother who loves her children and would do anything to protect them gets thrown away. Now she's suddenly so selfish and uncaring and irresponsible. It's just so easy for some people to be able to hate a female character. I mean, maybe it's not quite an example of this, but it's starting to sound like Toriel can join the characters hated just because they're female group. And people might argue, well, no, I wouldn't hate Toriel if she wasn't selfish and didn't do that to Chris. So now Toriel is only a likable character if she truly plays into the motherly trope of always being the caregiver and responsible parent, while Asgore goofs around. She can't be lovable with flaws, and having made one mistake so far in the entirety of Deltarune. Anyways, Carol is an example of a character who defies the tropes of a warm and caring mother and is cold and powerful. While I think it's way too shallow to say that Carol is a cold mother and Toriel is a warm, caring mother and leave it at that, while both characters are going to be seen having multiple traits and sides to them, I still think this juxtaposition of the two characters is interesting. I also think it's interesting for Noelle and could show why she grew up to be so passive and scared to speak her mind if she grew up with a harsh mom, but that's its own thing to dive into. Additionally, what's interesting is even though Toriel is more of a caring mother and Carol is more of a cold one, both their kids seem to have issues nonetheless. Noelle is too passive and won't state her opinion. She's scared, lets people use her. Chris obviously has some unresolved trauma of sorts, which I'm sure they have in common with Noelle, and outside of also being literally possessed, seem to have other issues prior, like struggling to make friends. While we can't blame Des's disappearance causing Noelle and Chris trauma on Carol or Toriel, at least not now, maybe later, who knows what could be revealed, we could still consider both parents' reactions to it. I noticed in my script, and myself am writing this like Carol and Toriel are single parents, although there's a difference between, being bedridden with an illness and being divorced and an absent father. I still think it's interesting how Toriel and Carol seem to have to be single parents for one reason or another. They seem to mirror each other, having two kids around the same age as each other, both just taking different approaches to raising them. While we haven't seen enough of Carol to really figure out how she's handling Noelle's trauma, aside from her seeming to care deeply for Des and want to find her. I wonder if Carol acknowledges Des's disappearance with Noelle because it seems that Toriel and the rest of the town ignores it. For Toriel, Chris was admitted into art therapy at some point in their lives. While we don't know before or after Des's disappearance, it can also be assumed Chris might have had a violent past of sorts. And Toriel does worry about them and how they're acting. While she doesn't ever seem to sit down and have a heart-to-heart with Chris, we can't write off that this possibility never happened. I always like thinking about how different the story might be if Carol or Toriel was the father in the situation. I think it's all an intriguing discussion and commentary on gender roles and the expected roles of parents. I think it's all also something we have to wait to find out more about in terms of how these characters will develop and if any of these tropes will be followed or killed in the story and how. Well, thank you all for joining me in this video and for all the support recently on my channel. We're super close to 1K and that's amazing. I have to think of something to post for that. I hope you all enjoyed hearing my thoughts, and if you have anything to add, please feel free to comment.